The rain had come softly that night, tapping against the window of the Clark farmhouse like a gentle reminder of years long gone. Anna Clark sat near the hearth, sorting through an old cedar chest that had belonged to her late mother. Dust filled the air, each mote dancing in the light of the dying fire. She hadn't meant to find anything special, just memories to pass a quiet evening, but then her fingers brushed against a small envelope bound with a faded blue ribbon. Her heart stilled. The paper was brittle, the ink nearly gone. But the name, written across the front, struck something deep inside her. James Holt. She didn't know the man, yet something about that name felt heavy with meaning, as though it had been waiting for her all this time. She untied the ribbon and carefully opened the letter. The handwriting was bold but trembling, written by a soldier far from home. "If I don't come back, promise me you'll live the life we dreamed of." The line that followed made her breath catch. "I'll find you again, even if it takes another lifetime." Anna's eyes glistened as she read it again, the words echoing through her mind like a half-remembered melody. Her grandmother had once mentioned a soldier who vanished during the war, a man her mother had loved deeply before fate tore them apart. But the story had always ended there, buried, unspoken, lost in time. Now, as thunder rolled across the valley, Anna felt that silence break. The air in the house seemed charged, the fire's glow shifting like a heartbeat. For a fleeting moment, she thought she heard footsteps on the porch, slow, deliberate, impossibly real. She opened the door to the rain-soaked night, heart pounding, eyes scanning the misty field beyond the gate. No one stood there. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching from the dark. That night, as the storm deepened and the candle flickered low, Anna left the letter on her nightstand. Sleep didn't come easily, and just before dawn, when the rain finally stopped, she woke to find the window open and the blue ribbon gently swaying in the breeze. Morning came slow to Willow Hollow, the rain clouds still clinging to the hills as if unwilling to let the night go. Anna stood by the kitchen window, the letter open beside her cup of coffee, its words etched now into her mind. She had not slept a single hour. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that name, James Holt, and the flicker of that blue ribbon swaying in the early dawn light. By mid-morning, she saddled her horse and rode into town. The muddy road wound through fields still damp from the storm, and every creak of the saddle seemed to echo the letter's promise. Her first stop was the town library, a small brick building that smelled of rain and old paper. Mrs. Penmore, the elderly librarian, looked up from her desk and smiled softly when Anna entered, though that smile faded when she saw the letter in Anna's hand. "That name," Mrs. Penmore whispered after a long pause, "hasn't been spoken here in decades." She led Anna to the history section, her fingers trembling slightly as she pulled down a leather-bound ledger. James Holt was a Union soldier stationed near Hollow Ridge during the war. He never came back. Some say he died saving another man. Others say he just disappeared. Anna's chest tightened. Was there ever proof? Mrs. Penmore shook her head. "Only stories. Your grandmother, she used to come here, too, always asking about him, always leaving in tears." The words hit Anna harder than she expected. Her grandmother had died years ago, taking her secrets with her. But now, the pieces were surfacing, drawn by something she couldn't yet explain. That evening, as Anna rode home, the valley looked different, strangely alive. The mist that hung between the trees shimmered faintly, like threads of silver light. And at the edge of the old Clark property, she saw it, a figure standing near the stone well, motionless, watching. Her horse tensed beneath her, nostrils flaring. Anna called out, but the wind swallowed her voice. When she blinked, the figure was gone. Only the faintest trace of footprints led toward the ridge, where the old battlefield lay forgotten under decades of grass and silence. When she reached home, she placed the letter back in its envelope and whispered the name once more, James Holt. The air in the room seemed to stir, soft and cold, as though someone had heard her. And for the first time since finding the letter, she was sure of one thing. The story wasn't over. It had only just begun. The next morning broke grey and still, the kind of silence that made even the birds hesitate to sing. Anna stood at the edge of the Clark property, staring at the distant line of the ridge. The memory of the figure by the well haunted her, the way it had stood motionless, as if waiting. She had told herself it was her imagination, but the chill in her bones refused to fade. By noon she had packed a satchel with a lantern, her notebook, and the letter. The old trail leading toward the ridge was overgrown now, grass swallowing the faint traces of wagon wheels and boots from another century. The land had a strange pull, an invisible thread drawing her forward. The further she walked, the heavier the air became, until even her footsteps seemed to echo with something other than her own rhythm. At the base of the ridge stood the remains of what might have once been a camp. Half-buried stones formed a circle, and rusted fragments of tin cups lay scattered among the weeds. Anna knelt beside a tree whose trunk bore a single carving, an H, barely visible beneath years of weather. Her heart stuttered. It couldn't be coincidence. As the clouds gathered above, she lit her lantern. Its glow spread across the clearing, revealing something she hadn't noticed before, an old canvas scrap buried in the dirt. She pulled it free, her fingers trembling as she brushed off the mud. The fabric was stained and torn, but one line of stitching caught her eye, a blue thread, the exact shade of the ribbon from the letter. Then the wind shifted. It carried with it the faint murmur of voices, low, rhythmic, like distant chanting. Anna froze, her pulse quickening. She turned in every direction, but the trees were empty, the clearing still. Yet the sound persisted, curling through the mist like a memory. "James," she whispered, and at once, the lantern flickered. A cold gust rushed past her, sending the flame sputtering before it steadied again. The air smelled suddenly of smoke and iron, the scent of an old battlefield. Her breath caught as she saw something ahead, half hidden, beneath the roots of an oak. A glimmer of metal. She dug with her hands until her fingers struck steel. It was a pocket watch, old but intact. When she pried it open, the world seemed to still. Inside, etched in elegant script, were two words, "For Clara." Anna stared at the name. It wasn't her grandmother's, but she knew it from the stories. The woman who had vanished after the war. The one who had lived in Willow Hollow before her family ever settled here. The realization struck her like a storm. The letter, the ribbon, the watch, they were all fragments of a single story buried beneath. Generations of silence. And somewhere in that silence, James Holt was still waiting. The next evening brought rain that refused to stop. It came in. Sheets that blurred the hills and turned the paths into rivers, but Anna kept walking her lanterns swaying through the storm. Her mind was fixed on the name etched inside the pocket. "Watch for Clara," it echoed through her. Thoughts like a forgotten song. She needed to know who Clara was and why her name kept circling her family's history like an unanswered prayer. When she reached the ridge, the storm began to calm. The world dimmed into grey silence and the mist rolled across the fields like smoke. The ruins of an old cabin stood hidden among the pines, its roof caved in, and walls leaning, but the stones of its chimney still stood strong. She stepped inside and felt a strange warmth in the air, as if the space itself remembered the people who once lived there. She set her lantern on the hearth and knelt beside the crumbling stones. Her fingers traced faint marks carved into the wall, letters weathered by time. She could barely make them out, but they spelled a name, Clara Holt. The pieces fit together too perfectly. The soldier's letter, the pocket watch, the old stories whispered by her grandmother's generation. It was all connected to this place, this woman, this man, who went to war and never returned. Lightning flashed across the ridge, lighting up the cabin's dark corners. For a breathless second she saw something move, a faint silhouette of a woman standing near the doorway. Her form shimmered like mist, her face both young and ancient. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. The lantern flickered, then dimmed until the cabin was swallowed in shadows. Anna's heart pounded. She whispered into the darkness, "Who are you?" The air trembled, and a voice soft as rain answered, not from the shadows, but from inside her own mind. He kept his promise. He never stopped looking for her. The words struck deep and tears welled in her eyes. The figure faded slowly, leaving behind the faint scent of lilacs and smoke. The wind outside howled through the broken boards as Anna realized what the ridge had been all along. Not just a graveyard of soldiers, but a place where promises still lingered, waiting to be remembered. When she stepped out into the night, the rain had stopped. The moon broke through the clouds, casting silver light over the ridge. Anna clutched the letter to her chest and whispered into the wind dial, "Finish what you started." The air stirred in answer, and for the briefest moment she thought she saw two figures standing together at the edge of the woods, watching her, the soldier and the woman, finally side by side, before fading into the mist. Morning came soft and quiet over Maple Ridge. A pale light crept across the damp fields, and the storm's echoes faded into stillness. Anna hadn't slept. Her thoughts circled the ghostly woman she had seen in the cabin and the words that still whispered through her mind. He kept his promise. He never stopped looking for her. The pocket watch lay open on the table beside her, its steady tick matching her heartbeat. She turned it in her hand again and caught a faint engraving she hadn't seen before. Find the hollow. Her breath quickened. The hollow was a place her grandmother once mentioned, a valley north of the ridge where strange lights were said to rise after midnight. By noon Anna was on the trail. Again her lantern swung at her side as she moved through the trees. The path grew narrow and overgrown, the air cool and heavy with the scent of rain and pine. When she reached the hollow, the mist parted to reveal a quiet valley, untouched by time. A stream wound through the grass, and at its center stood a weathered stone monument, half sunk into the ground. She knelt beside it, brushing away the moss. The words carved into the stone read, "For those who were lost yet never gone," and beneath them two names side by side, James Holt and Clara Holt. A tremor passed through her. She traced the letters with trembling fingers, feeling as if the air itself held its breath. Then she heard the low hum of wind through the trees. A faint shimmer gathered above the monument, forming two shapes, a man in a soldier's coat and a woman beside him. Their hands intertwined, their faces glowed with a peace she had never seen before. The woman looked at Anna and smiled a soft, knowing smile, and in that moment Anna understood they had waited to be found, to be remembered. As the figures faded, the hollow grew still again. Anna sat beside the stone, the pocket watch warm in her palm. She whispered into the air, "You found her," and for the first time since the night she opened the letter, she felt the ridge finally rest. The days that followed were calm yet filled with a strange pull, as though the ridge itself was calling her home again. The nights grew quieter, the air sweeter, and for the first time in weeks Anna dreamed without fear. She saw fields of gold, a soldier walking through them, his hand brushing the tall grass, and a woman waiting beneath the maple tree by the creek. Their faces always turned just before she could see them, and each time she woke with the same ache in her heart. One evening as the sun slipped behind the hills, she walked back to the ridge, carrying the letter, the pocket watch, and a small wooden box she found among her grandmother's things. Inside it were two silver rings tied together with that same blue ribbon, worn but unbroken. She realized then what no one in her family had known. The woman in her grandmother's stories, Clara Holt, was her great-grandmother, and James Holt, the man who had written the letter, was her blood too. The discovery filled her with warmth and sorrow. Her family had carried their unfinished story for generations, and now she understood why the echoes never stopped, why the ridge had always felt alive. She climbed to the highest point overlooking the hollow, where the last light touched the trees. The wind moved softly around her, and she spoke to the air as if it could listen. "You kept your promise, and now I will keep mine." She untied the ribbon from the rings and placed them inside the pocket watch, then buried it beneath the old oak tree. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the valley in deep gold light, and the ridge seemed to sigh as if relieved. The mist that had clung to the trees for so long drifted upward and vanished into the evening sky. As darkness settled, Anna turned to leave, but before she did, she caught one last glimpse across the clearing. Two figures stood hand in hand at the edge of the light, the soldier and the woman. Their Faces peaceful, their eyes bright with gratitude. She smiled and whispered goodbye. And thank you, then they were gone, and the ridge was silent once more. When she returned home, the house no longer felt empty. The letter rested on the mantel beside the candle, its words, faded but eternal, if I don't come back, promise me you'll live the life we dreamed of. Anna closed her eyes and whispered softly, I will. And from somewhere beyond the hills the wind answered like a gentle voice, finally at peace. Seasons passed quietly over Maple Ridge. The grass grew tall around the old oak, and the wildflowers returned to the hollow as if drawn by some unseen warmth. Anna kept her farmhouse bright and open now, her days filled with peace that had long been missing. Every so often she would walk to the ridge to sit by the tree where she had buried the pocket, watch the wind always moved gently there, and sometimes she thought she heard faint laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves. Years later the town began to speak again of the ridge, not as a haunted place but as one where the lost found their rest. Travelers said that on misty mornings a soft golden light glowed among the trees, and two figures could be seen walking hand in hand before fading with the dawn. Anna never spoke of what she saw that night, yet she kept the memory alive through her writing, filling page after page with the story of James and Clara Holt. In time her words spread across the country, reaching readers who felt the ache of love that defied even death. People wrote letters to her farmhouse, thanking her for the story, saying it reminded them of promises they too had once made, and hearts they had never stopped waiting for. Anna would smile at each letter, knowing that the ridge had given her not just peace but purpose. One autumn morning, many years later, a young woman arrived at the farmhouse. With a notebook in her hand, she introduced herself as a writer from the city, researching old legends of the West. Anna welcomed her in and told her the tale the way it was meant to be told, not of ghosts or fear but of love that waited through generations. When she finished, the young woman said softly, someone should make sure people never forget this. Anna smiled and said, that is why you're here. When the woman left, Anna walked once more to the ridge. The sun was setting, the sky painted in gold and crimson. She stood beneath the oak, listening to the wind as it brushed through the branches and whispered like an old friend. Then she saw it just for a heartbeat, the glimmer of two figures standing side by side before fading into the light. Anna closed her eyes and whispered, thank you for keeping your promise. Then she turned back toward home, her heart light and her soul calm, knowing the ridge would always remember. And that, dear listener, was the last letter from Maple Ridge, a story of love that refused to die and promises that lived beyond time. If this tale touched your heart, let its echo follow you. Subscribe to Whisper Tales and listen for the next whisper waiting just beyond the ridge.